Hey guys, so I just returned from an epic adventure in Kenya. That's Africa, for those of you not familiar with geography. And I wanted to share a little bit about my experience there. Um, it's not going to be a recap of my trip, but I'm going to give you 15 takeaways from this trip to Kenya. And on my way, or on our way, I went with my wife, and I said to her when we were talking about just travel in general, there are so many places that I want to go in this world. I could name 50 off the top of my head right now without even thinking about it. And the only one that I can now say had, since it's in the past tense, had to go to was a safari. It didn't have to be Kenya necessarily, but I love animals, always have. It's just the one thing that I wouldn't be okay if I never experienced that. Where a lot of other places, you only have so much time, so who knows? I probably won't get to them all if we're being realistic. But this is one I had to do. So to be able to say that I've already now crossed that off my list is pretty amazing. So anyway, 15 takeaways from this trip of a lifetime to Kenya safari. One, grandmas. Now, you can call this close by family or having family near you, but we are lucky enough to have both of our moms within an hour distance. We're in Brooklyn, they're on Long Island, and they stepped up and were willing and happy to take our perfect, well behaved boys for our time away. One of our sons went to each grandma, and it really, we could not have done this trip without that. A friend of mine said, teach me how to do this. How are you doing it? And my answer was, have amazing grandmas that happen to live close by. So I highly recommend go out and get you some grandmas that are in the area, because that allows you to do amazing things. And we're fortunate enough that we were able to do this and go away for 9 days knowing that our boys were well loved and taken care of. Two, learning. Every day on safari out there, it was like being in a classroom. It was just insane the amount of knowledge that was thrown our way, and different every time, even though you're going on technically the same game drive. Even though you go in different directions, it's over the same piece of land. There are just so many different things coming your way, and I just know so much more right now about animals in general, and Africa, and the landscape, and even flowers, nature, and just weather that I did not know prior to this trip. And it was really nice to go to school like that and just learn about something that is interesting to me. Three, guides. Speaking of the learning, you obviously need great teachers. I remember when we went to, my wife and I went to Chile, or as they say, Chile, on our honeymoon about 5 and change years ago. And I came back from that trip saying that tour guides in Chile are the smartest people I've ever come across. And it wasn't even the guys that were just in our camp. Like, we also in Santiago went to like a tour of Pablo Neruda's house. So like, it wasn't a guy that I had an intimate day-to-day relationship with. Just like, everyone that we come across was just smarter than the next, so worldly, just knew so much about so much, and I was incredibly impressed. So anyhow, here you're paired up with a guide. So each of our camps, we had one person who was our dude, who like took us around every single day, and I just said, we were in school, they were the teacher. So getting the right guide is just so important. And we were lucky enough to have one pretty good guide in one camp, and then one exceptional guide in the other one. Like, we would let him take care of our kids. Like, we adore him. And they're just dropping knowledge, spitting fire all day long, and it's just incredible to have them on your side for the journey like this. You just need it. And it could go the other way, I'm sure. Like, we interacted with a couple of guides who we were like, I'm kind of glad you're not my dude. So you got to get a little lucky there. 4, David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. So about 6 years ago, maybe on Valentine's Day, I adopted an elephant for my wife, who was a big lifelong elephant fan. And yeah, key move, I know. Um, from the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Kenya, in Nairobi. And we still now get updates once a month from them about how our elephant's doing. So, a part of the reasoning to make Kenya the place that we're going to go on safari was the fact that we could go through Nairobi and go to David Sheldrick and see maybe our elephant. He actually has moved on to the next phase, one step closer to the wild. But just see the baby elephants and the fosters that they have there. And we went there on the last day in Nairobi on our way to the airport, essentially. And you get to see these 19 fostered baby elephants. So what the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust does is, when elephants are out in the wild, are orphaned by poachers to their parents, whatever reason, they take them in, they nurture them, feed them, and kind of get them ready to put them back out into the wild. And it's in today's day and age, with all of the daily horrors and atrocities that we're seeing, I often say to my wife, there are people out there doing great work, and David Sheldrick and the Wildlife Trust, they fall into that category. They're just doing amazing things for these little guys. On the same note, number 5, conservation. So both camps that we stayed at have huge pieces of land. One, 32,000 acres, the other one similar. And essentially, there are just mass efforts to protect the animals on this land, the actual land, and the surrounding local communities. Most of the employees at these camps are local members of these villages and communities that live outside the land of the conservation land where the animals are. So it's just another, like I said, another example of just people out there doing great positive work, and you'd like to see that and get that type of news and interact with that in today's day and age. Number 6, Nairobi. So we flew into Nairobi, spent a night there, and then flew out and spent half a day there. So we didn't necessarily get to see the city center, which we heard is not overly exciting, but it is clearly an emerging international city. And we went out to dinner to like a cool happening place, and it didn't look too different from a New York restaurant, to be honest. All of the advertisements are in English, and the big tell with an emerging city is, starting in October, I believe, there's going to be a direct flight from JFK to Nairobi, so that is now officially on the map. Number 7, safety. It is amazing how safe we felt throughout this trip. We are in their home, these wild animals in their home, a few feet away, in one camp actually, sleeping in the middle of the wild in a tent, a nice big tent with a deck a little bit raised, but like hippos right in the river right in front of us. Animals can easily access where we are, and a few feet away, that like bad shit can literally happen at any single moment, and you pretty much feel safe the whole time. One time where I felt a little uneasy. So in both of our camps, we did game walks. Instead of using a car to drive around and see the animals, we actually went to foot and walked through the bush. On the first one, we had our guide with us. It was my wife, myself, our guide, and then we had a park ranger who had army fatigue head to toe and a rifle. Let's put that to the side. On the second game drive at the next camp, we had myself, my wife, our guide, and then 2 other local Maasai people. This was in the Masai Mara. And the 3 of them had spears, and my guy had a machete, my guide, and a club, and they just had like some tools like that. No guns. I'm the last person to advocate for guns. However, I would have felt much safer, or I did feel safer having the gun guy with us. And it's certainly not to shoot and kill. I would never ever advocate that. An animal. But simply one shot in the air makes these guys run away. And whereas a spear or a machete, like that seems like you got one shot, right? Like you throw the spear or you wing the machete or even use it, like what if there's a pride of lions and you get one? Great. What if there's a herd of elephants? I think a spear is going to stop that, or 3 spears? So that second walk, there was a period in the middle of it where I was like, I kind of am ready for this to get back to camp as soon as possible. Obviously, and everything ended up being totally fine. Number 8, fart jokes. Now hear me out. The ability on safari that you have is to blast one out and say something like, I didn't know there were ducks on safari. There are ducks in Africa? Something like that. And it works every time, except for my wife. She's kind of over it by now. But trust me, it's a good takeaway from a trip to safari. Speaking of my wife, number 9, partner. It is so important to have a partner that has a similar view of the world, a similar values, just being on the same page about what matters and what's important. In regards to travel specifically, it allows an epic trip like this to develop and become a reality in the planning and discussion stages, rather than just an idea that sounds cool and something that pushes off until, hey, we'll do that when the kids are in college, like a lot of other things or whatever. And then it allows it to become executed, and it actually becomes a reality, and it just makes everything that much easier and more enjoyable when you're there, to have someone that is just with you, on the same page as you. And I am lucky enough to have that in my life, which allowed this trip to happen. Number 10, family travel. So traveling with our family is something that is extremely important to us. Now, our boys are too young to really travel at this point. We're thinking about ways we can kind of ease into it. Like obviously, they've been on airplanes a handful of times, but all, California, Florida, nothing exotic. But on this trip, we were inspired by a number of families that were traveling together, mom, dad, 2 kids, more in the 8 to 11, 10, 13 type of brother and sister, brother and brother sibling combos. But point being, we did interact with a lot of people who were living this type of life. We had dinner one night at our camp with a family of 4. The kids were, I think, 11 and 8. And this was a big trip. Last year they went to South Africa. The year before that they went to the Galapagos Islands. Next year they're going to Asia. And they do this one massive family trip every year. And it just is, you can live any type of life you want. Something that my wife and I always try to remind each other. And it's so true to actually see it out there happening. Next time you want to take your kids away to Aruba or Puerto Rico, maybe there's another option. Number 11, malaria. So everyone who goes to Kenya or goes to Africa from the States takes malaria pills. You take them a couple days before you leave, every day while you're there, and then like a week after. We believe, after speaking to people on the ground and being where we were, that it is a total scam, that we could have been completely fine without malaria pills. We basically didn't even see a mosquito. Where we were in Kenya is like 6,000 feet above sea level, So there are literally no mosquitoes. I don't even think we saw a mosquito. If you're down by the coast, Mombasa or Diani Beach or something like that, a different story for sure. But the fact that like everyone's like, oh, you're going to Kenya? Oh, you've got to take those malaria pills. Like, do we? Do we, guys? Everyone who lives there, they don't take malaria pills ever. They're like, if someone gets malaria, it's like super easily treatable. Now, do I want to be having to be treated on my trip for malaria? No, but I don't want to have to be treated for chicken pox either. I'm not taking medicine to stop that. Anyway, whoever's doing the malaria PR, I want to talk to that publicist because you're doing an incredible job because you have forced a nation into purchasing pills every single time that they travel abroad to this country. 12. Animals. I've always had a deep affinity for animals from a very young age. My wife too. And when you're there, you're just like, yo, they fucking live here. It's like being so close to them on their turf. You really can't explain it, right? Like, I can tell you about it. I can show you pictures of like super close interaction with such real shit, but you can't understand it unless you have been there. And people who've been on safari, I think, can be in this little club where it's like a little nod. Oh, you've been there? I get it. You get it. We know. And I wish everyone can get it. Like, I want everyone to experience this, especially if you love animals, because it is just so incredible to be that close to them. 13, social construct. And this is, again, of the animals. So the rules and structure that these species have within their own groups is just astounding. From gazelles, have one male with a harem of women. That could be 5 women or 50 women. And there are other males like around trying to intrude and like take over their spot. Female lions, they do all the hunting. Male elephants, they leave the herd at their formative years, and they could form little bachelor crews of guys, and they're just like going to be bachelors for a handful of years until they form their own herds. Cheetahs hang in pairs. The ones we interacted with were brothers. Actually, there's a documentary on Netflix called Big Cat Diaries, and these brothers are the kids of like the mom cheetah that's featured in that show. Leopards living solitary lives. Hippos sending some males into exile at certain points, who go and live in their own little mud pond in the middle of the wild until they try to get back into the river crew. Harvester ants, don't even get me started. It's just absurd the way that these beings know how to interact. Amazing. And again, this all falls back to the learning and the teaching and just having the people to throw this information and knowledge your way. 14, the gruesome or gruesomeness. I don't know what the right word is there. Shit is real out there, kids. 2 stories in particular that fall into the gruesome category. So our second night on safari in our first camp, we were going for a sundowner. So at sundown every night, our guide would find a nice open spot. We would park the car, get out, in the middle of the bush, and he would have wine, beer, whiskey, chips, nuts, like a little snack drink as the sun goes down. So he took us this day to like this super high peak, like a top of a mountain in this very mountainous area, this first area. And we were actually, as we were pulling up, he's like, oh, some friends are going to join us. There was like elephants, a family of elephants on the side of this mountain as we were going to the top. So as we parked, we were like walking over and like peeking, how close can we get to them? Being on this side allowed us to see down into the valley. One of the guys that was with us for this ride, we had an extra guide with us, essentially, another employee of the camp. He, out of nowhere, points way across to the other side. I don't know how these guys, their eyesight is incredible. It's another thing I did not mention about the guides. Just incredible eyesight and instinct. He spots something all the way, so far away, I can't see it with my naked eye. It's a lion with its mouth around the back leg of an eland. An eland is a huge antelope, like almost weighs a ton. I would say this one, 1,500 pounds. And there's this female lioness that it's like dragging essentially. The eland is walking, and the lion is just clamped onto its back leg. We start getting binoculars, we're watching it, we're like, holy shit, what's going to go on here? Our guide, who this is the one that we absolutely love, he's like, do you guys mind if we cut Sundowner short and like go down there and check this out? We're like, hell yeah, let's do it. So we drive down, we find the spot, and what we find then, this is probably 20 minutes later now, is, on the side of this little rock, the eland is now down on its side, and this lion is just sitting, lying on its like hind, essentially, with its claws dug in. The eland's alive, and the lion just sits there. And every minute, 2 minutes, the eland gives it a go, yells out a big roar, and tries to get up, gets its front legs on the ground, lion drags it right back down to the ground. Another minute passes, just sitting there breathing. The lion's just sitting there breathing, starts like biting at its hind just to kind of like annoy it a little more. Eland again roars, lets up, tries to go, lion drags it back down. And we're sitting 20 feet away from this as the sun's going down. And this scene goes on for 40 minutes, an hour. And, it's being explained to us that what's happening here is the lion is just kind of waiting it out. And the lion is slowly going to crawl closer to the top, to the head or neck, until it can just put the final blow on it. So we're sitting there in this car, drinking our wine or whiskey, watching this as it gets dark. We have these our guide has these amazing spotlights so we can kind of like see what's going on. And sure enough, eland keeps trying, lion keeps saying, lion gets closer. Now the lion is actually like biting into its side, and we are seeing death happening right in front of us. And it's a lion kill. You dream of seeing these type of things. You don't see them that often. It's pretty rare. Like our guide has like never seen something like this. And it's just this one-on-one battle of endurance. And ultimately, the eland stops breathing. The lion wins out. And we drive around to get now a closer view, because now the lion's about to chow down. And we watch the lion just like, from now we're 10 feet away, the lion just eating the inside of this massive, massive animal. The next morning, this is actually the same story before I get to the second story. The next morning, we're going horseback riding, actually. And I say to my guide, you think that they're still, like, are the lions still eating? So what we thought would happen is the lion would then call for its pride, and they would all come and have this massive dinner. So I think, you think the lions are still eating? He's like, well, we have to go that way to get to where we're going anyway, so we'll find out. So we pull up. It's in the middle of the road where we have to cross this half-eaten body, and there are 2 or 3 hyenas eating with like 10 other hyenas spread around in like the neighboring area. So what happened was the hyenas came and essentially ran off the lion and made this their meal. The rest of the lion pride never got there. But now, so the hyenas run away as we pull up in the car, but this eland is in the middle of the road, so our guide and the guide in the car behind us have to get out and drag it off the road so we can go through. So these dudes get out of the car and grab the horn, the antler, the leg of this 1,500-pound animal and drag it off the road. It's like half-eaten, body open, guts spilling out. Like, it's just a scene, dude. A real scene. Taking me back to an uneasy place. So anyway, the other gruesomeness, and sorry to make the tail end of this all about the horror stories, but like I said, shit is real. We saw a couple of Jeeps or trucks stopped, which means they're watching something cool, right? Or something that we should go see. So we drive over and we see another eland dead with two hyenas eating it. We see it from the back. It's like lying on its side and two hyenas are going to work. And it doesn't fully make sense because there's no way the hyenas could take down this huge animal. So where is the thing that killed it, and why aren't they eating it? Anyway, we drive around to see like the front side of the animal. I don't remember why we did that, but like it's basically torn open. You can see everything inside this animal. And sure enough, as we're sitting there, a huge lion comes back, followed by a baby or like a 1-year-old male, just the two of them. So obviously this is the lioness that made this kill, and they go to work. And we sit there and watch them eat the rest of this thing, or eat as much as they can, and the little baby lion or the male lion takes a part out and starts just like throwing it around like a doll, and like it's a little toy. And we're just like, I guess this is nature and this is what happens, but it's still not that easy to watch. But point being, you're like looking at these type of scenes and you're like, this is happening right now. Like, this is not Nat Geo or the Discovery Channel or something like that. Like, this is not TV. We are live and this is real, and it is, like I said, absolutely gruesome. But wow. And finally, moving on, 15, travel. And I went away a lot growing up, but I was on a lot of planes, but I didn't see the world the way that I now look at as I would define travel, as much as I want to in the second half of life here. It's just so important to get out there, visit new places, meet new people, see new cultures, experience new shit. And there's really no better way to do that than traveling. Like I said earlier, it's very important for us to do this with our family and show our kids the world. Like, I don't know that there's a better learning tool than experiencing other places in this world. And I hope to, get the chance to do that many, many, many more times with them and with you. Even you guys want to go away, hit me up. Let's do it. I just want it to be a part of everyone's lives. And next time you're thinking about, like I said, taking that trip to the Fountain Blue in Miami, maybe go a little farther and hit up Belize or Ecuador or Nicaragua or something like that. Like, there's just so much to see. Go out there and see it and do it. And I can't implore you enough for that. And I'm really talking to myself at the same time, because like I said, I didn't do enough of it, I believe, and I want to do more of it, and I plan to. So those are my 15 takeaways from this epic adventure, really trip of a lifetime. And I hope to go back on safari again. I hope to take my kids, but this one was one for the books. I hope to have my fancy pictures, not just the ones I took with my phone and posted on Instagram while I was there, available in the very near future. Maybe you'll check out some of those if I, who knows what I'm going to do with them. But unbelievable, truly unbelievable. Kenya, safari, go do it. Glad I could experience it and share it with you guys in this form. And if you have any questions, would love to discuss. If you've been there before, would love to hear your stories. Just remarkable. So big shout out to Kenya and everyone who made this trip possible. Thanks.